Western Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 2 degrees, 5 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. If you ride the rails in Ottawa, you're looking at almost another 2 months before you can commute on the LRT. That's according to city staff, but Mayor Jim Watson hopes it will be back sooner than that. Here's City News reporter Prushka Gobalkista.
The city believes it could be by mid-December that we'll see full service of the LRT, but Mayor Jim Watson agrees with the November 29th deadline. Although he understands why the city thinks it could be by the end of the year that we'll see full service, he agrees that the work that RTG is doing makes him cautiously optimistic that the trains will be running by next month.
Our staff continue to push RTG and RTM to make sure that whatever they're doing is done properly and safely, and that we get the trains back up and running as quickly and as safely as possible.
From now until early November, test trains will run on the tracks, which will determine safety requirements needed for a full safe return. Partial service of the LRT is expected to return in the next couple of weeks. Purishka Gopal-Kista, City News.
City News time, 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Not as warm for us as yesterday, but a beautiful fall day overall. Plenty of sunshine, the high 11 degrees. There will be a brisk wind, though, out of the east-northeast. Tonight, mainly clear, down to just 2 degrees. And then tomorrow, sun and cloud, showers late in the evening, mainly overnight, though. Friday's high 13 degrees. For today, the high 11.
And right now in Ottawa, 2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 5. A 30-year-old paramedic in Ottawa has been charged with uttering a false document over vaccination status. Acting on information, Ottawa police charged Ali Abdelghani after discovering proof of vaccination they say was obtained submitting forged documents. Abdelghani has been released until a court appearance that is scheduled for a later date. Police in Thunder Bay have charged a couple of Ottawa men in connection to the death of a 33-year-old at the start of October. 19-year-old Shane Cabral and 30-year-old Michael Gomez are charged with first-degree murder. It was October 3rd. Thunder Bay police were called to a residential fire after a body was found inside. Both accused remained in jail until a court appearance on the murder charge. That will happen on Wednesday coming. They were among 4 people arrested for an unrelated drug trafficking investigation when those murder charges were laid. City News time, 9:02. A fire this morning in a garage at a 2-story home on Dawson. That's around the Kirkwood-Byron area. Now, crews arrived just after 4 o'clock this morning and found fire in the detached garage, but that had spread to the eaves of the home. A downed power line complicated the operation. Hydro Ottawa had to come in and cut the power there. Firefighters say the blaze was out a little after 5 o'clock this morning and no injuries were reported. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is off to Europe this morning. It's a 6-day trip, mostly touting Canada's promise on climate change and the COVID-19 recovery.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will start his trip with an official visit to the Netherlands before he heads to the G20 Leaders Summit in Rome and the United Nations climate talks in Scotland. Trudeau's hope to push Canada's credibility on climate change at both meetings could be boosted by a new study today showing his latest climate promises may finally get Canada all the way to meeting a greenhouse gas emissions target. Trudeau intends to use the G20 to push for more vaccine equity around the world, but Canada has only distributed 6% of the vaccine doses it promised to donate earlier this year. Mia Rabson, The Canadian Press, Ottawa.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Inform your opinion.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Oh, what a show, what a show, what a show. What a show we have for you today. Rob Snow Show, City News. Good morning. We're glad you made that decision to spend part of your busy day with us. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson is coming on the program this morning, 9:45 this morning. So much I want to ask the mayor. My only worry is, will I have enough time? I want to ask him about the city's new official plan, passed yesterday by council. Want to ask him about more money for the super library downtown, a lot more money. Mandatory vaccination policies for city workers, for the Ottawa Police, for OC Transpo. Light rail, light rail, light rail. It's been 39 days. Where's my light rail? And it's now less than a year to go until the next municipal election. Will the mayor run again? Jim Watson, Rob Snow Show, 9:45 this morning. Reconciliation is back in the news. And it's a story with a deadline. The Prime Minister may be jetting off to Europe today, but the clock is ticking for his government to make a very important decision. Will his government appeal two human rights tribunal orders that would result in billions of dollars in compensation for Indigenous children? His government is under immense pressure to let these cases go. Quote from the Globe this morning: one of the orders focuses on compensation for Indigenous children and their families, and the other pertains to eligibility criteria for First Nations children accessing services, end quote. It has been 2 years since a human rights tribunal ordered the Trudeau government to compensate each First Nations child that was taken into care after January 1st of 2006. We're talking about more than 50,000 children. And the other case deals with what's known as Jordan's Principle, also dealing with First Nations child welfare. And the Trudeau government was given 30 days by the federal court, a judge of the federal court, to make up its mind. Are you going to appeal this and continue to appeal this? Are you going to continue to take First Nations children to court? That 30 days expires tomorrow. And look, David, the Prime Minister's not even going to be in the country, okay? He'll be out of the country for the next 6 days. I don't know if you can read anything into that. Do you read anything into that? Is the Prime Minister getting out of Dodge here or what? But we are going to get the ins and outs, the particulars of this looming legal deadline with the help of David Taylor. He is a lawyer with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, which is involved in one of these cases. Future of long-term care here in Ontario is a focus for us this morning. The long-term care advocacy group Advantage Ontario wants the Ford government to commit to having all future government funding for any new long-term care beds to go to either the not-for-profit sector of long-term care or the municipal side of long-term care, and not to for-profit long-term care home operators. Now, we've been popping into the Queen's Park question period all week, and whenever we do that, what are they talking about? This issue. They're debating this issue. This has been really the dominant issue in the Ontario legislature this week. This group says the Ford government's plan would see more than 60% of the government's new beds or upgraded beds go to for-profit homes, even though that's what most people in Ontario don't want to see, given the track record of for-profit long-term care homes during the pandemic. Not an enviable record. And this organization says the government's own data shows that 2 out of 3 people on the wait list for a long-term care bed aren't picking for-profit long-term care homes. They're picking not-for-profit or municipal homes as their first choice. So we're going to get into that issue just shortly here in about 5 minutes from now. Inflation. Big story all week. Will be, by the sounds of it, for many months to come. Not so transitory after all. I think that's the takeaway from yesterday's announcement from the Governor of the Bank of Canada. No big shock. There's no move on interest rates, but that is coming to an end, ladies and gentlemen, sooner than anyone thought just a few months ago. And that's because of inflation and the rising cost of living. 4.4% annual inflation rate. Strongest in almost 20 years. An inflation rate that is going to average 4.75% for all of this year. And that's one reason why the governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, said yesterday, surprisingly, that the central bank is ending its bond buying program, its asset purchasing program, quantitative easing, QE, over now. The Bank of Canada will no longer drink its own bathwater. And he signaled that interest rate hikes are coming. The era of ultra-cheap money is soon to be over. Because the central bank, he said, is going to do what it has to do to beat back inflation and get inflation back around 2%. This is not what the Bank of Canada was saying earlier this year. It was tapering already. It was reducing this bond buying program. And now it's over. But on inflation, it's singing a whole different tune now. It has changed its tune on inflation in a big way. And we're going to talk to one of the top economists in the country about this. Benny Tell is the deputy chief economist at the Bank of Commerce, the CIBC Bank. International Affairs professor Elliot Tepper is going to join us at 11:30 for his weekly segment that we call The World. We have a new foreign minister for Canada, Melanie Joly, our 5th foreign minister in 6 years. It's like a revolving door over there for ministers at the Pearson Building. We're going to ask Professor Tepper about that. China, this is a big story. China has been testing hypersonic missiles. Isn't that great news? And the chairman in the United States, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, called the most recent missile test by China a Sputnik moment that caught the United States by surprise. More great news. And Boris Johnson's Conservative government in the UK released a budget yesterday, and it is a monster spending budget, about $130 billion Canadian worth of new spending. It is raising the national minimum wage. It is raising corporate taxes. And Prime Minister Boris is a huge climate change crusader. He's hosting the upcoming climate change conference that gets going this weekend in Scotland. We'll get into all of that with Professor Tepper, Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner, Calgary area, and talk about the cabinet shuffle, and in particular, the duo now heading up environment and climate change and natural resources, the dynamic duo of Misters Guilbeault and Wilkinson. Can you imagine how this is going over in Calgary? And when you seriously look at the makeup of this cabinet, and I will, you could make a solid case that the West has just been forgotten, abandoned. You could argue we don't have a government of Canada. We have a government of Toronto and Quebec. 39 cabinet ministers. The GTA has 14. Quebec has 11. Combined, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, 2. Not 2 each, just 2. I want to explore this a little bit more this morning with your help. Our telephone system is back up and running, David assures me. Okay. Thank you to our engineer. The Talk Back Hour is back, baby. Yes. I want to take calls on this today. I want to talk about this cabinet shuffle. I want to get your reaction, but I have a very specific question that I want to ask you. I did not think I would be talking about the cabinet shuffle today, but I think it's a story that has some staying power. I think this cabinet shuffle could have big consequences for the country. Big consequences for our economy, big consequences for the unity of Canada. I'm worried about what could happen to the country as a result of this cabinet shuffle. I'm worried about the decisions that the Prime Minister has made here. I mean, he's off to Europe. He's going to go and attend the big climate conference, COP26. That is his, clearly, that is his priority file right now, climate change, fighting climate change. His government declared a climate emergency. A lot of Canadians believe we're in a climate emergency. He has named a former Greenpeace agitator as his new Minister of the Environment, Mr. Guilbeault. The old Minister of the Environment becomes the new Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Wilkinson. And it worries me. It worries me a lot because of what it could mean for, as I said, the economy and national unity. It's a government that's declared a climate crisis. I get that. It's won 3 elections in a row. I understand that. A lot of Canadians say climate change is a big issue for me, and I want the government to do something about it. I understand that. But a lot of Canadians also say they're worried about jobs, the economy, and the rising cost of living. So I think we're at a crossroads here. And I want to ask you, what should we do? Do you want the Canadian government? Do you want the Canadian government to put in place a serious plan to meet its climate change targets, greenhouse gas emissions? Even if that means higher costs for you, almost $1.50 for gasoline now. What if it was higher? Much higher, potentially. A serious plan to meet climate change targets, even if that means higher costs for you and damage to the natural resources sector of our economy. Do you want the government to put in place a serious plan to meet climate change targets if it means higher costs for you and hurts the natural resources sector of our economy? That's the question I have for you this morning during the Talkback Hour. We do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock at 750-1310. I want to hear from you today. I missed you. We have reached the fork in the road. Which way should we go? Here we go. Rob Snow Show, City News.
So the birth of absinthe was 2002, I think, 2003, and I was working at Urban Bistro, happily, where Allium is now. And then the space where Holland Cafe was came up. It's on the corner of Spencer and Holland. And I spoke to the landlord, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of other people, but he and I just, got along super well, and he put a lot of faith in me. So Carmen Turner is his name. He gave me the lease to the place and really pretty much gave me all the equipment in the place. So I was really lucky. I've been really lucky with landlords that way, actually, both my current landlord and Carmen Turner. Because if there hadn't been Carmen Turner, there wouldn't have been Absinthe. So we were there for a few years and just sort of outgrew the place. And then now we're here. It's obviously been tough, and it's been tough for everyone. I mean, that's the, been the big democratic sweep of, like, in restaurants and the hospitality and the arts that we were talking about earlier. It's like everybody's been impacted pretty much the same. From everybody that I talked to, we're down 75, 80%. We're climbing out now. I think one of the saddest things is like everybody, we went down to 2 employees from 25, and we're now at 4, and we're bringing 2 new people on this week, so we'll be at 6. So it's, little steps. So it's been tough. It's, I've got the most expensive clubhouse ever here, because some days you come and you don't do any business, but you're here. But I'm grateful for what I do have. I think everybody's optimistic now, not necessarily just about the vaccine, but about like the vaccine, spring, being able to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot of like pop-up things happen in parking lots and on sidewalks and all, and like that, rather than being actually inside somebody's commerce. I think we'd like to take it outside. I know my staff would. My staff like the outdoors now all of a sudden, all 4 of us. 6 soon. But we'll be doing stuff, some business in the patio in the parking lot, and we have a patio out front. And I think I hope other restaurants and stores will do the same. I hope that they take advantage of like the sidewalk and doing sort of, guerrilla marketing and stuff like that, and really shaking it up a bit. You can find us at Absinthe Cafe at 1208 Wellington Street West in Hintonburg, and you can find us online at absinthecafe.ca.
Opinion
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News,
1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
Let's talk about the future of new beds for long-term care in the province of Ontario with Lisa Levin, the CEO of Advantage Ontario. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you again. Thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
It's my pleasure. Always interesting to talk to you.
According to your organization, 60% of new long-term care homes planned by the Ford government here in Ontario would be awarded to the for-profit operators of long-term care homes here in the province. What is your reaction to that revelation?
Well, firstly, that's what the minister said in the House twice, and I've since been told by government that the number is closer to 50%, so I don't really know, to be honest, the exact number, but certainly it's not 100%. And so my take on that is that we're really concerned about the government's reliance on for-profit corporations to provide care in long-term care, especially after what we saw during the pandemic. And we think that all government funding to develop new long-term care beds in Ontario should go to not-for-profit and municipal homes.
Okay. Why?
Well, firstly, that's what people want. So to get into long-term care, you usually have to go on a wait list.
Right.
And 68% of people on the wait list choose not-for-profit long-term care homes. Secondly, not-for-profit and municipal homes offer 20% more care, like hands-on care for the residents. And as a result, they have better outcomes for the residents. People go to hospital less. During COVID, there were less fatalities. So 46% of beds in Ontario are not-for-profit or municipal, but only 22% of fatalities were in these homes. I mean, there should have been no fatalities, don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
COVID was just awful. But there was a lot less in the not-for-profit and municipal homes.
Yeah, I'm hoping you could give us a little more information as we kind of revisit the last, year and a half, almost 2 years now of this pandemic and the terrible toll that it took on the frail elderly living in long-term care. If you could just maybe expand a little bit more on the record of not-for-profit long-term care and municipal long-term care, municipally provided long-term care, versus the for-profit. How do the two records stack up against each other?
Well, firstly, we have to recognize that our system has been underfunded and under-resourced for many, many years, and we have been calling on government for more money. They finally did say that they would give more money for care. Mm-hmm. And then you take that and you layer on top of it an illness that impacts frail elderly more than any other group in society in terms of deadly outcomes, and people living in congregate care settings where the disease could spread. And you put all of those together and you have this horrible tragedy that happened. However, long-term care homes do have more staff than that are not for profit or municipal than for-profit homes, and also they are run by the community for the community, and there was a lot more accountability and transparency that I think ensured that the homes kept everyone that they could safe, and they did everything. I mean, everyone did everything they could, but it seemed that there were more personal protective equipment, more masks, more infection prevention control, more staff, more help from the community, all around the not-for-profit and municipal homes.
The government's target is to eventually build or redevelop some 30,000 beds. Do I have that figure correct? About 30,000 beds? Longer term, right?
They have to build 30,000 new beds, and they have to redevelop 30,000 existing beds, or else they're going to be closed by 2025.
I see. And what do you think of those targets from the government?
Well, firstly, the homes that need to be redeveloped, we don't want them closed. And secondly, we need at least 30,000 beds. But we need to look at the whole continuum.
Okay.
We also need more home care.
Yes.
We need more assisted living. We need to look at the entire continuum. People want to stay home as long as they can.
Sure.
But because of the fact that we have an aging population and people become frail and sicker than ever before because they're living so long, we do need those long-term care beds.
Yes, I understand, but just given the investments from previous governments, the neglect of long-term care didn't start with the Ford government. You'll grant the Ford government that, I'm sure.
Oh, no, this has been going on for years.
It's decades,
and
right?
They actually
neglected,
have been trying to fix it more than any other government we've worked with.
Okay. Okay. So it is at least a welcome turn of events that they have this target, right, of 30,000 new beds.
Yeah, the 30,000 target was actually from the other government as well, because the
in the dying days of its existence as a political entity, basically, right? Okay, but I guess what I want to get at is how feasible is it that the vast majority of beds could be of the not-for-profit or municipal variety in Ontario? You know, there are calls to end for-profit care altogether in Ontario. I'm just wondering how feasible that is. Could we deliver timely, affordable, quality, long-term care without for-profit care?
We absolutely can, Rob, but what needs to be done is we need to change the way the program is structured. Okay. Because right now it's structured and it's to favor for-profit homes. So not-for-profit homes need help with financing. And it's easier for a for-profit chain to get that financing. So if you go back in time to the 1980s when governments built a lot of social housing, that was done completely by municipalities and not-for-profit grassroots groups. And the way they were able to do that is they had loan guarantees from government, they had seed funding from government to get started, and even the most marginalized groups were able to go ahead and build social housing in their communities. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do in long-term care so that we can ensure that we have groups from cultural organizations, different communities, faith-based groups, so that they have the capacity to build long-term care. Right now, it is harder to do that.
Okay. I thank you for your time this morning.
You're welcome.
Great to hear
have
from
a great day.
Yeah, Lisa Levin, CEO, Advantage, Ontario. Coming up next, David Taylor, a lawyer with the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, on the looming decision for the Trudeau government appealing First Nations child welfare decisions. What will happen tomorrow? We'll get some perspective on that here on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 5 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. A 30-year-old Ottawa paramedic facing serious charges, including forgery. Ottawa police investigated a complaint someone in the paramedic service gave a fraudulent vaccination certificate. Ali Abdelghani was released on an undertaking. He will appear later in Ottawa court. A fire this morning at a garage at a 2-story home on Dawson. That's around the Kirkwood-Byron area. Now, crews arrived just after 4 o'clock this morning. They found fire in that detached garage, but it had also spread to the eaves of the home. No injuries were reported in that blaze. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau kicking off a European trip with an official visit to the Netherlands. Jam-packed 6-day trip will also include climate discussions at the upcoming G20 summit and the United Nations COP26 meeting. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Will the Trudeau government appeal 2 human rights tribunal orders that could result in billions of dollars in compensation for Indigenous children? The federal government has until tomorrow to decide. Joining us for some insight into these cases is David Taylor, a lawyer with First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's very nice to hear from you, sir. Can you give us some history of the background of the case that you're involved in?
Sure. So this case has been going for quite a long time now, for 15 years in February. And back in 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal concluded that, in fact, the federal government was racially discriminating against First Nations children living on reserve by providing them with inadequate child welfare services, and also was discriminating against First Nations children who needed services by failing to uphold Jordan's principle. And so the tribunal ordered the government to fix the system, and as part of the remedies, the remedial process that flowed from that order also concluded that the government had to pay compensation to the children who were harmed and also to their parents. And that's the decision that the government needs to decide to appeal or not. By tomorrow is on the compensation, and that's already been through one level of appeal at the federal court, and in September, Justice Favell of the federal court upheld the tribunal's orders as reasonable, and so now they would be deciding whether to take that ruling and challenge it at the federal court of appeal.
At the federal court of appeal, and that's the next step, as I understand it, and the federal court ruling said you have 30 days to make up your mind on whether you want to appeal this, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that deadline is tomorrow. Right?
Exactly.
Is there I'm sorry. Is there like a specific time just for us in the news business so we know?
Generally, 4:30, 5 o'clock, but it's the federal court, which has jurisdiction across the country, and so if people were being creative, you could say 4 o'clock in Vancouver. But right. we would expect that we'll know by late afternoon tomorrow what is happening either way.
Okay. What has been the government's side here in dragging this out for so long? How does the government explain its actions here?
It's kind of hard to understand because the government has been saying since the election in 2019 that it wants to compensate victims of the discrimination, and yet we still find ourselves in court. And their arguments have been largely technical ones that have had to do with the tribunal's jurisdiction or the nature of compensation under the Canadian Human Rights Act, which is a federal law that gives rights to be free from discrimination to people in federal jurisdictions. And what the federal court concluded was that there's no need to go through those technical arguments, that this is exactly what Parliament intended when it created the Human Rights Act and said as part of the Human Rights Act that victims could receive compensation, and that the existence of other avenues for compensation like class actions or other kinds of lawsuits don't detract from the tribunal's ability to make the orders that they made back in 2019.
Okay. So in the Human Rights Tribunal ruling of 2019, it ordered the federal government to provide up to $40,000, right, to each First Nations child affected by this discrimination. Is that right, sir?
What it decided effectively was it said the most it could award in compensation was $40,000. And so it said that it was going to award $40,000 to the children who are in the worst case scenarios of discrimination.
Okay.
And so on the child welfare side, that's children who were taken away from their homes, families, and communities. And so it said there can be no question if a child loses its home, family, and community, then that's the worst case scenario. It's hard to think of worse discrimination than that for a child. And so those children will all get $40,000 if the tribunal order is upheld. And there may be children who suffered discrimination at the lower end, but essentially the tribunal found that based on the evidence in front of it, it wasn't able to make an award for them, and so it really focused on those worst case scenarios.
Because I was under the impression that one of the government's problems with the ruling from the tribunal is how compensatory damages are being calculated and the difficulty in assessing that. Is that accurate at all to say that?
Sure, that's one of the things we've heard from them. Certainly in talking.
Like, how do we award this person $40,000 and this person not to get $40,000 and whatnot?
Yeah, or the idea that some kids spent more time in care, and the Caring Society's position on that has always been there's no reason it can't be a yes and. Just because the Human Rights Tribunal is limited to $40,000 for the worst case scenarios, if there are worst case scenarios that are way worse than others, the government has other avenues to pay more compensation to those people. And I think it's not really a serious argument to say that something as severe as when you're a child being taken away from your parents and your extended family network and the community that you're from and being sent somewhere else to grow up with strangers or in a different culture, that's not worth $40,000 even if you were only there for 6 months. It's a traumatic experience being removed, and that's really what the tribunal was compensating was the actual removal, which is the same for everybody. If you end up in foster care, they all have that moment of having been taken from their homes, and that's the pain and suffering that is being compensated, and that's half of the $40,000 is for pain and suffering. That's $20,000,
right? And
then the other half of the $40,000 is for willful and reckless discrimination. And so that's a really important conclusion the tribunal made, which is the government had lots of chances to fix this problem. They knew about it for over a decade before the final tribunal order was made in 2016, and they didn't take those opportunities to fix the system. And so you had more children coming into care when the government knew that there were solutions and knew there were ways to fix the problem. And so half of it is the pain and suffering of being removed, and then half of it is the nature of essentially they behaved themselves into this order by not changing their conduct.
So it's more than 50,000 children, right?
That's right. The estimate is about 50,000 children between 2006 and 2019. So that's the rough number that we're looking at based on experts.
And no compensation has been paid yet. Is that right?
That's right. Right. The compensation system doesn't come into effect until the orders are final.
Right.
And in our legal system, an order is not final until there are no avenues of appeal. So either it's if the government chooses to fight this all the way, it would be the Supreme Court of Canada saying either we don't want to hear this or we're confirming the order, or it would be the 30-day period running and the government not mounting an appeal, and then the order would be final at that point. So if that happens, then the compensation process the parties have negotiated would start to operate.
Okay. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if you have any inclination what's going to happen tomorrow. I find it curious that
unfortunately,
I do find it curious that the Prime Minister is not in the country. I will say that he's out of the country for the next week or so. I don't know if we can read anything into that. Maybe that's just me being over speculative, but nevertheless, let's say the news comes out tomorrow, and the government confirms it will appeal this again to the Federal Court of Appeal. How long a process could that take? Could that take weeks, months, years?
It will be months. I'd be surprised if it was going to be years. The kind of default process under the Federal Court of Appeals rules would have us, if the court had space for us in their schedule, potentially we could be in front of a panel of judges in May or June of next year. And of course, it takes the court the time it takes to write their decision. It took Justice Favell about three or 4 months, actually three months to write his decision, which is pretty quick. I would say optimistically, if we had a decision by the end of 2022, that would be pretty good. So I'd say if they were to appeal now in October 2021, we could be looking at 10 to 18 months to get through the Federal Court of Appeal process if everything goes well.
For the uninitiated, for those who are, because I think a lot of people are kind of, when it comes to First Nations child welfare and Indigenous welfare issues in general, a lot of us are playing catch up on a lot of these issues, as I'm sure you can appreciate. What is Jordan's principle? What is that?
So Jordan's principle is the idea that all First Nations children have the right to have the same outcomes from public services that non-First Nations kids do.
Right.
And so there's two aspects to it. One is if the federal government or the provincial government could do something, then whichever government is first in contact with the child should do it. And that's the situation Jordan found himself in. He spent years waiting in hospital to go to a therapeutic foster home because the government of Manitoba and the government of Canada were arguing about who should pay for it. And he, in the end, didn't get to go to that placement.
And he died.
Away in hospital. And he died, exactly. And so his family and his community, Norway House in Manitoba, said there shouldn't be any more kids like Jordan. Whoever is first on the scene should pay for in that case, the therapeutic foster home, and then they can argue about the money behind the scenes. But at least Jordan gets the services he would have got the services he needed, and his family could have come down from Norway House and visited with him in a family home in Winnipeg instead of on the ward in the hospital.
Yeah.
And the second idea, which has come through the Human Rights Tribunal process, is that you have to recognize that First Nations kids have higher needs than non-First Nations kids in a lot of scenarios, either because of where they're located in the country or things like intergenerational trauma from residential schools. They face obstacles that other Canadians don't face. And so you need to meet the kids where they are and provide the services to meet their needs to help them overcome those obstacles and barriers.
So there was another Human Rights Tribunal ruling on that, as I understand.
Exactly,
it, right?
in 2017. And that's an area where we've seen some more progress from the government. We've had over 1 million services approved for First Nations kids in the last 3.5, 4 years.
Okay.
And so that's obviously significant progress. But that's where the compensation element comes in, is what about the kids who, in the 10, 11 years the government was fighting this from 2007 forward, didn't get those services and had delays to their development or pain and suffering as a result. And that's where the compensation element of the order comes in.
And a deadline looms on that for tomorrow as well. Both of them
are subject to tomorrow, exactly. There's a third portion of this, which is which children are eligible to receive services through Jordan's principle. The government was using Indian Act status as essentially a gatekeeper for that, and the tribunal said that's not appropriate. Federal court agreed, and so there's an order on that as well that the government has to decide tomorrow if it's going to appeal or not. So they've got lots of work on their end in terms of the calls they're going to make, and if we're going to go forward with litigation, or if we're going to roll up our sleeves and start getting results for kids.
Right. So there's been a cabinet shuffle, of course. New Minister Haidu, will have to be briefed on all of this and up to speed on it after she's been immersed in the pandemic because she was Minister of Health, of course. Can the government ask for an extension? Could it be granted an extension? Or is this a firm deadline tomorrow?
Yeah, the Federal Courts Act is pretty clear. You've got 30 days to make your call, and that's essentially it's applicable to everybody from the from a taxpayer who wants to challenge a rate assessment to the government facing a compensation order. These 30-day windows promote certainty and finality in terms of knowing what's going to happen next. So they need to make a call by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay. We're watching it with great interest, sir. I thank you for your time.
And I thank you for your interest. It's been nice chatting with you this morning.
David Taylor, lawyer, First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. Deadline tomorrow on that decision by the Trudeau government on whether to appeal that. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson coming up next on City News.
I always knew I was going to own my own business, and I've always wanted to have a store. And I sort of figured when the right concept came together at the right time, I would move forward with that plan. And so through doing some environmental initiatives in the restaurant group that I was with prior to opening this store, it just triggered my path towards being more environmentally conscientious and wanting to make more of a difference, and hopefully encouraging, inspiring other people to want to do the same, at which point the idea for All Eco was born. I have some really fun products. I have a really wide spectrum of products. So the things we look for in terms of qualifying products are sustainably made, upcycled, recycled, zero waste, all natural, no harmful chemicals to like the environment or to our bodies. We have like fun stuff, so like really clean burning candles, lots of really natural body care and skin care. I put a real emphasis on Canadian products. I really try to support up and comers, and I always source Canada first. The refill bar is really important to me. It's really huge. I think that's been exciting as well, because I thought it was going to be a real process in convincing people that this is a better way to go. And actually it was just like right away there was a built-in affinity towards doing refill, which has been great. We closed, I think, probably we were closed down by before the second week of March. Just didn't feel we could comfortably or confidently stay open, even though I do sell essential products, like in terms of the cleaning. But we just didn't feel we could make a safe space for ourselves or our customers at that time, and especially with the information we had at the time. So we did close our doors, at which point I did not have a website, because that was only, I hadn't even scheduled myself to have a website at that point. So that was sort of like full speed moving towards that and trying to drive the business, at the same time still get myself on the map, because I was so new. So during that time, as we were building the website, we were still doing a lot of video shopping and private shopping, online shopping, like online phone, text. Any way I could do business, I was doing it. And there was really a nice show of support for my business during that time, which was really, really encouraging. And now, we are fully set up online too.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcoming back to the Rob Snow Show, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Good morning, Your Worship.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure, sir, as you know, always. So lots of things to go over from the City Council meeting yesterday.
It was busy.
I have always been a proponent for a new main branch of the Ottawa Library, even though that puts me offside with a lot of my listeners, and a lot of people in the public now are doubtful, just given the escalating costs. Nevertheless, costs that were approved yesterday. How do you convince people that this library project is worth the money?
Well, a couple of ways. I think when you look at the use of libraries by people in different communities, it's the number one membership club in the city of Ottawa. Nothing comes even close to it, the number of people that use the library, and particularly the main branch. Secondly, this is a really unique partnership because we have the federal government moving part of Library and Archives Canada to the same building. So there's cost efficiencies that can be done. And third, if you look at some of the cities around Canada, not to speak of around the world, they've been investing in world-class library facilities for some time. Halifax always stands out, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary. They're good investments for the community because libraries are the great equalizer. You don't have to pay a membership. You can come in and help search for a job, write your resume, research a project for school. And if you've seen the pictures of it, which are available on ottawa.ca, it really is a spectacular building that will once and for all kickstart the LeBreton Flats redevelopment, because that will be the first major project on the LeBreton site. For 60 years, that site has been vacant. And it was a very strong vote. It was, I think, 22-1 in terms of going forward with the project. There was some members of council were fighting against putting a parking putting parking at the building, which is a little ironic because some of the same people fighting putting parking there were fighting against parking at the Civic Hospital. So there's a bit of inconsistency, but pleased to see that the vast majority of councillors thought this was a good investment. And, as you know, Rob, when the estimates go out, they are just estimates. And the reality is don't know the final cost until the tenders are opened. And obviously with the rate of construction, which is a good news story going on in Ottawa, it ends up putting prices of labor up as well as supplies as a result of the pandemic.
Well, it'd be interesting to know what that's done to the cost of Phase 2 of light rail.
Well, we have a fixed price contract for Phase 2 of light rail, so it doesn't have an impact.
Okay. How do you defend on the official plan a project like Taywin? So I have had respected Algonquin leaders on this program like Claudette Commanda. They're opposed to it, and it seems to be out of step with the city's planning principles. How do you defend this Taywin project?
Well, a couple of things. It's completely within the provincial policy statement, the PPS. Staff are recommending it, and it was voted on quite a strong vote of support for the official plan. It's not just Taywin, it's the whole plan. I think is a very progressive, forward-thinking document. The reality is that there's obviously disputes between different Algonquin nations and different Algonquin communities, but the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan are the only group that are recognized by the federal and provincial government for land negotiations. The province sold this land to the Algonquins. They started a partnership with Taggart, a well-known and respected construction company. And, we're really good at symbolism when it comes to First Nations, Rob, land acknowledgements and renaming the William Command a bridge and so on. But we need more than that. The First Nations need to be able to work with the rest of the community to benefit from some of the economic opportunities that others are benefiting from and First Nations aren't in terms of employment opportunities and the like. And, we need to grow where people can live. I said yesterday, on average, 26 people a day move to Ottawa. On the surface, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that adds up over hundreds every week and so on. Yep. And we need places for people to stay and to live and to work and find employment. And if we're not putting it there, it's going to go to other parts of the city. So some colleagues don't want to expand the urban boundary, but they also fight intensification when it's in their ward. So we're put in this awful position where, well, that doesn't really make much sense. You can't. I was going to use some expression, you can't what and blow at the same time.
Sure.
You got to be able to say, well, if you're against the expansion of the urban boundary, because that's very expensive, then you got to support intensification that's reasonable. And we had a project, for instance, it was right across the street from the Westboro bus depot, which will be an LRT station, and it, there was members of council that voted against that. Well, that's what transit-oriented development is, to get as much density around the transit station so people don't need a car if they don't want one. They can walk to the transit station.
I want to move on to light rail. Former Ottawa Mayor and Regional Chair Bob Chiarelli was on my show this week, and he said that you have failed to show leadership on this issue. I'm going to play you a clip, Mr. Mayor. This is Bob Chiarelli a few days ago on my show here.
Really invisible in the media as this thing has been breaking. He's very, very rarely has he stood up and made a statement in terms of how this thing can be resolved.
He says you've failed to show leadership and you've done a disappearing act. How do you respond to criticism like that?
Well, it's ironic. I'm doing a radio interview with you right now. I'm saying that I can't recall turning down a whole lot of interviews over the last 10 years. I do regular press conferences. After council meetings, we had one yesterday. I am available. I think people. You know me. I'm not some wilting flower that disappears. But I also don't go out. And hold an hourly press conference on updates on every single issue. I think you pace yourself, and I do a lot of work that Bob would know about behind the scenes, because the mayor is not just responsible for holding press conferences. You got to do some of the heavy lifting and being very, very demanding of our partners who have let us down with phase one of LRT. So that continues to be my preoccupation. I spend probably 90% of my time dealing with LRT issues and COVID. Those two take up about 90% of our time.
Really?
I'm proud of the work that we've been doing on COVID, but very disappointed with the performance of RTG and RTM and Alstom. And there is, some glimmer of positivity. Yesterday they started testing the trains, so that's good, and we'll continue to keep pressure on them to get the system up and running as quickly but as safely as possible.
Okay. Councillor McKenney plans to try again to have council debate and vote on a motion to have the city call a judicial inquiry into LRT. Will you allow that vote to take place this time?
Well,
or will you maneuver to cut that off again?
Well, from my perspective, I'm not going to support that because I already voted to support the Auditor General, and the majority of council, a strong majority of council, voted to do the same thing. So, if it comes down to a vote, I'm not going to support it. I don't want to spend $20 million, 3 years, and have very little to show for it. I think the Auditor General route, which was proposed by two of my colleagues, makes much more sense. She's an independent statutory officer of the city. She has the powers to investigate these kinds of things, and she is no pushover. She has told us very clearly she'll be setting the parameters and the scope, and not us. And that was a very good shot to us to make sure that we understand that her independence is something that she takes seriously. And as I said, it would be a fraction of the cost. There's ample examples of judicial inquiries that have just gone on and on and on. In Hamilton, I think they've spent over $10 million, haven't seen one
Yes,
witness.
but some of them, everybody mentions this, but nobody ever talks about what they uncovered. Cronyism, nepotism, and in some cases downright corruption, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not saying that that's what we would find here, but people have to start telling the second half of that. Look, we're almost short of time.
Yeah,
I have to ask you.
Let me just say one thing on that. The reality is that the Auditor General will then bring the report, which will be fully debated and discussed at Audit Committee and then on to City Council. So it's not a question of shuffling it off to some bureaucrat in the system. It's going to the Auditor General, and she, as she indicated to us, will set the parameters and the scope to find out what went wrong and how we can improve things on future stages.
Okay. It's less than a year to go until the next municipal election. Will you stand for re-election?
Well, I get asked this, I guess, about once a week when I'm on different radio shows, and the same answer. I'll make my decision known by the end of this year, so that's not too far away.
Okay. It's Miracle Treat Day. This is my final question, and it'll be a softball. Okay. It's Miracle Treat Day at Dairy Queen. I've already had my blizzard. It's okay to eat ice cream at 8 o'clock in the morning, I think. Mayor Watson, what is your favorite type of blizzard?
Oh, hands down, chocolate chip cookie dough.
Chocolate chip cookie dough. Okay.
And I think every Dairy Queen in Ottawa knows that. I travel a fair amount around Ottawa, and there are a lot of Dairy Queens, and it's chocolate chip cookie dough. Although they offered a Kit Kat, I found, but it seemed like the Kit Kat was stale, the one I got. So I'm back to chocolate chip cookie dough.
Okay. In moderation, Mr. Mayor. It's all good, right? Thank you. Very generous. Thank you.
All right, take care. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. The news now on City News.
1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now on both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 5 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa's mayor says the library has the biggest membership of anything in the city by a long shot. Jim Watson says that is one of the reasons, along with many others, why it's a good project, even with the added cost.
We have the federal government moving part of Library and Archives Canada to the same building, so there's cost efficiencies that can be done. And third, if you look at some of the cities around Canada, not to speak of around the world, they've been investing in world-class library facilities for some time.
Now, when asked about the potential to the same fate for Phase 2 of light rail currently under construction, that is a massive increase in cost, Watson says the contracts signed already are fixed price. They cannot change. And as for the next municipal election coming up 1 year from now, Mayor Watson says a decision on whether to offer again will come before the end of this year. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Not as warm for us as yesterday, but a beautiful fall day overall. Plenty of sunshine, the high 11 degrees. There will be a brisk wind, though, out of the east-northeast. Tonight, mainly clear, down to just 2 degrees. And then tomorrow, sun and cloud. Showers late in the evening, mainly overnight, though. Friday's high 13 degrees. For today, the high 11.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 5 degrees. City News Time, 10:04. All breaking news, provincial government has now lifted all the capacity limits for outdoor organized public events. So that includes things like Remembrance Day services coming up next month, Santa Claus parades. The government order says if physical distancing is not possible, masks will still have to be worn. Now, capacity limits have also been removed for outdoor areas of fairs, rural exhibitions, and festivals. Now, outdoor social gatherings are still limited to 100 people. Outdoor capacity limits at nightclubs do remain in place. An Ottawa paramedic has been charged with using a fraudulent COVID-19 vaccine certificate in order to keep his job. Police say this man obtained his certificate submitting forged documents and attesting he had received 2 doses of vaccine from the provincial vaccine clinic. The City of Ottawa informed police about the man's fraudulent certificate last Thursday. Now 30-year-old Ali Abdelghani was arrested Wednesday and charged with uttering a forged document. The interprovincial zip line has now welcomed over 30,000 riders this season. The crossing between Ottawa and Gatineau has seen travelers ranging in age from 7 all the way to 88 years old. The zip line is set to end its run this year on Halloween and reopen in May. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Yes, they are, and we mean it today. First talk back in a couple of days, and I would love to hear from you. We're talking about climate change and the economy. We're talking about the environment and the economy. Or is it the environment or the economy? Here's my question for you. With Prime Minister Trudeau attending the upcoming COP26, United Nations Conference on Climate Change, starts this weekend in Glasgow. Here's my question for you. Do you want the federal government to put in place a serious plan to meet its climate change targets for greenhouse gas emissions, even if that means higher costs for you and economic damage to the natural resources side of our economy? Pain for the natural resources side of our economy. We have these new targets, okay? We want to, this is the Trudeau government pledges to cut greenhouse gas emissions between 40 and 45% below 2005 levels by the year 2030, okay? Less than 9 years from now. And then be net zero on greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. Those are our targets. You want the federal government to do everything it can to meet those climate change targets, even if it means higher costs for you and paying for the natural resources side of our economy. That's my question. 750-1310, 750-1310. 613-750-1310. It's our first talk back in a couple of days, and I'd love to hear from you this morning on this issue. I have a lot to say about it, don't worry. I mean, usually cabinet shuffles, they come and go. They're news for a 24-hour news cycle, and usually that's about it, and the political news media will move on to other things. Not with this cabinet shuffle. And I want to get into this issue with you today because I can't remember a cabinet shuffle that has had me so worried, quite frankly. It has me worried about two things, the economy, and it has me worried about national unity. And I'm worried because of the appointment of two cabinet ministers. Jonathan Wilkinson goes from being the Environment and Climate Change Minister to becoming the Minister of Natural Resources. And Stephen Guilbeault, ex of Greenpeace, he moves from heritage, where, let's face it, he spent much of his time promoting this dystopian internet regulation bill, Bill C-10, and now he has landed his dream job as Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And to me, I think that there is every reason to be worried about that. This is not just a shift to the left. This is a shift to the activist left. And I fear a lot of us are going to be poorer for it. And I fear for the very unity of the country. I really do. Now, I hope I'm overstating it. I really do. I hope I'm overstating it. Maybe I will have been found to have been engaging in hyperbole, but right now I don't think so, but I'm open to that criticism. I think as a country, we've arrived at a crossroads, a fork in the road. The country under this Liberal government, under this Prime Minister, we may be about to take a dramatic turn. You know, Canada is so wealthy by any measure. The envy of almost every other country in the world when it comes to having an abundance of natural resources. But at the same time, we have a government that has declared a climate emergency. We have a government that is, whether you like it or not, fresh off of its third election victory in a row, albeit with 32% support, and a government that is vowing that and seems intent on doing everything it can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to achieve net zero by the year 2050. And it is committed to that goal. I mean, it's been on full display. You know, the Prime Minister fueling up Can Force One to fly off to Glasgow for the big global climate change conference. And that's why my question for you here in the talkback hour is, given the prominence that this issue has and the Prime Minister attending COP26 this weekend, do you want the federal government to put in place a serious plan to meet its climate change targets, even if that means higher costs for you and pain for the natural resources side of our economy? That is my question for you this morning. Okay? This idea that we should scale back natural resources production, keep the oil in the ground, limit extraction of natural gas, stop mining for coal, nickel, copper, iron ore, uranium, potash, and if indeed we are in the final innings of the fossil fuel era, we should just recognize that. This is the debate I think we have to have. And you know me, with the Talkback Hour, it's back, and I'm glad it's back. It's all about the debate. I love the debate on the issues. And all opinions are welcome here, okay? I don't care if you're right-wing, left-wing. It's not really about left-wing, right-wing. It's really about what's the next big thing. And what's the next move that Canada should make? Is it, let's commit, okay, to fighting and doing everything we can to fight climate change, even if it means you have to pay more for gasoline, even if it means people in the natural resources side of the economy that employs 1.8 million people in the country, even if it means some of them might lose their jobs. They will have to be transitioned into other jobs, cleaner, greener jobs. What do you think about that? Catherine, good morning. You're on City News. Good morning, Catherine.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I want to state off the top, I've classified myself as an environmentalist. I've organic gardened for 40 years. I've, picked products that are not overpackaged, local, whatnot. Yep. I do not believe in this green energy at all.
Okay.
I think it's a plan to redistribute money and make the wealthy rich. I have read the book. I mentioned it to you before, Apocalypse Never. Everybody should read that book to get a reality check on what is happening in the environmental movement.
Right.
A slap in the face to Alberta, appointing that minister.
Guilbeault, yeah.
Yep. I can't see it helping the country at all. This prime minister has been one of the most divisive prime minister in our history.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with, we saw what happened in Ontario. The rich got richer. I know of Liberal insiders that were all set up for putting up the panels before it was even announced. I have firsthand knowledge of that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not helping.
Not helping.
Read that book. If you haven't read that book, read that book.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
It ties in with everything.
Right. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Let's go to Bill. You're on City News. Bill, good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
Hi, Bill.
What I would like to see is the carbon tax done away with, and I'd like to see a pipeline built from Alberta right out to the East Coast.
As would I.
Let's start using Canadian oil, putting Canadians to work.
Okay, what do you think about the federal government meeting its climate change targets?
I think it's a load up. Like Trump said, it's just all a hoax.
A hoax. Okay. Yeah, a hoax. Okay. All right. Not sure if it's really a hoax. It's certainly not a hoax that they want to do it. They don't have a very good record. The Trudeau government doesn't have a very good record at doing it, actually reducing greenhouse gases, but it's not a hoax that they want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They have this target. We want to cut greenhouse gas emissions 40 to 45% by the year 2030, 40 to 45% compared to 2005 levels, and then achieve net zero on greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. My question for you is, do you want the government to follow through on that? Because it's a high priority for them, obviously. Even if it means, would you be willing to do that even if it means higher costs for you? Gasoline, home heating costs, that would obviously cascade through the economy as well. And pain for the natural resources side of our economy, massive industry, critically important to the vitality of the Canadian economy. When we come back, this is City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. And the other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30-odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. But yeah, it's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. But I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. Running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you want the federal government to put in place a serious plan to meet climate change targets, even if it means higher costs for you and paying for the natural resources sector of our economy? Marie, you're on City News in the West End. Good morning, Marie.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi there.
Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I don't want him to do that.
Okay.
The Canadians are now we're going through, pardon my expression, hell. I paid $1.49 a liter for gas yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
They went and did some grocery shopping, and the manager happened to be around, and I said, my goodness, your prices are high. He said, you ain't seen nothing yet, ma'am. We're paying through the nose right now, but to put a person like Stephen Guilbeault into that portfolio, that's terrible. He's an activist. He's Greenpeace. He founded that, what was it called in Quebec, Equiterre. Yeah. We know what he's going to do, and he's not going to stop until he gets it. I want to protect the environment, Rob. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But not to the extent that people will not be able to live because of it. And that's what's going to happen. Take a look at what he put in his cabinet. Yourself and your colleagues at 1310 could go up there today and probably do as good a job or better than some of those cabinet ministers.
Okay.
It's true. I don't know. But you know what, Rob?
What?
We paid for it. The people that voted for this government, minority or not, look what he did. All during the campaign and before. Going to have Canadians backed, blah, 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 blah. What did he do 3 days later? Cut those people off. Not saying that some of them that got the CRB deserved it,
right,
but a lot of them did. He gave them 2 days. It was cut off on the Saturday, and they were supposed to call in on the Monday to whatever their call-in time was. He doesn't care now. He didn't get his majority government, so look out. He's going to pay us back.
All right, Marie.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. It's well said. Okay. Grease and rocks. For so long, our standard of living, first world, right? Standard of living pretty much second to none. Wanting for very little. It's been because of grease and rocks. Our abundance of natural resources. And the wealth created has allowed us this fabulous standard of living, socialized medicine, public education, pensions, social safety net. But now we have look, the reason I want to bring this up is because, in my opinion, we have a government that wants to go down a very different path now. It's not saying, the catchphrase is Build Back Better. It's not saying things like Green New Deal. It's not talking big about just transition. But when a prime minister puts this duo, Wilkinson and Guilbeault, into these positions, the message is clear. That whatever economic prosperity comes from natural resources, that is now secondary, whereas primary is fighting climate change. Message could not be more clear. 750-1310. 750-1310. 613-750-1310. Anne, you're on City News. Good morning, Anne.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, this all of this stuff makes me nuts because, and I agree pretty much with everything Marie said. The thing is, if you can be in a household, maybe you're two teachers, two federal government workers, whatever. Maybe you can afford the prices going up. But there is not a big enough chunk of the conversation that's devoted to people that can't afford it when something is 50 cents more, that they have to buy. Like, what you're doing is you're plunging people who are already poor into even more miserable poverty. And that just cannot be right. And the thing is, let's just get this out there. We have the lowest carbon emissions in the world. And why are we getting beaten up? And how is it going to do anything? Like, I'll bring up the old analogy, peeing in the pool. And the thing is, and this whole thing, like, I swear he wants everyone to get in an electric car. Okay. Where are we all going to plug our cars in? I'm in a condo building that was built in 2015. There's nowhere to plug my car in the garage. Right. So that's a lot of money to have to do that. I mean, and like, do you think poor people can afford an electric car? Oh, well, too bad. They just shouldn't drive then. Oh, that's going to be a nice quality of life for them. I mean, this is crazy. Like, if I thought any of this was doing anything helpful, maybe I'd buy into it. But the thing is, I buy into the normal things. Don't throw stuff into the water. We're already being taxed to death for gas anyway. And then, let's just keep adding to that. Okay. I mean, that's crazy.
So your answer is no.
Well, definitely. Like, this insanity has to
All right. Calm down.
Okay.
Calm down. You're kind of jumpy today.
I know.
Okay. All right.
It can be crazy.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Look, I'm going to try and limit my use of stats during the hour. It's like never my strong suit because I spend a lot of time looking at Statistics Canada data because it's hard to argue with data because data is not ideological. It's just data, right? But what becomes clear is when you look at our trade data, and we're a trading nation, we rely on international trade to maintain our standard of living. Whether you like it or not, whether you feel great shame or not, nothing rivals natural resources when it comes to what it contributes to our economy in terms of international trade. We have lots of it. They want it. Customers all over the world. StatsCan, its latest data, is for August. And for the month of August, we exported as a trading nation $12 billion worth of energy products. The best month for energy exports in 7 years. $12 billion just in energy. The second most valuable export for this country, metal and non-metallic mineral products. Copper, iron, steel, and aluminum. $7 billion worth of that stuff. Record-breaking month in August. Energy and mining. Grease and rocks. Booming. This economy should be on fire. $12 billion worth of energy products, $7 billion worth of metal and non-metallic mineral products, $2 billion worth of metal ores, $4.5 billion worth of forestry products, $4 billion worth of farming and fishing products, agriculture, aquaculture, $30 billion worth of exports in a month. That is the natural resources sector in our economy. It's more than half of total exports. Dwarfing things like the auto sector or aerospace or industrial machinery. As Brad Wall used to say, food, fuel, fertilizer. But now we have a prime minister who has put two hardcore environmentalists into key portfolios in his government. And the prime minister is on a jet airplane right now on his way to Glasgow for a big climate change conference. So am I right to be worried? Or am I worrying for no good reason at all? Pick it up after the news. Hang in there. 750-1310. Rob Snow Show City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 6 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa police have been told of an alleged sexual abuse involving a staff member at Gary J. Armstrong Long-Term Care Home. The city-run home says its staff is fully cooperating with Ottawa police. The city says an incident between a staff member and resident happened on Tuesday this week. As soon as that came to light, the staff member was removed from the home. A 30-year-old paramedic in Ottawa has been charged with uttering a false document over his vaccination status. Acting on information, Ottawa police charged Ali Abdelghani after discovering proof of vaccination they say was obtained submitting forged documents. Ontario is removing capacity limits at outdoor organized public events, so this would be things like Remembrance Day ceremony and Santa Claus parades. A spokesperson for the health minister says outdoor capacity limits are also lifted in most sectors, like fairs and festivals, outdoor areas of museums and zoos, and ski hills, as well as other outdoor recreational amenities. Almost a 25% jump in COVID cases today in Ontario compared to yesterday. 409 new cases today, along with 3 more deaths being reported. Of the new cases, 28 in Ottawa, 22 in Eastern Ontario, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, no new cases in Renfrew. Of the 32,400 tests done, 1.3% came back positive. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Snow Show continues.
The environment and the economy, the environment or the economy. Mr. Trudeau is on his way to attend the COP26 conference on climate change in Scotland. Do you want the federal government, his government, to stick to its serious plan to meet its climate change targets? A reduction in greenhouse gas emissions 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by the year 2030 and a net zero commitment by the year 2050, even if it means higher costs for you, even if it means paying for the natural resources sector of our economy. Sharon, you're on City News. Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Hi,
yeah,
Sharon.
well, you got my blood boiling again.
I do. Okay, I'm sorry to do that.
That's okay. No, I don't want them to do this. They are destroying the economy, and most people, I know I've got a few friends and relatives that say, well, then I'll drive an electric car. Well, the reality is without fossil fuels, there are no cars because the manufacture of a car now, most of it is plastic, and that's made from fossil fuels. So just driving an electric car doesn't mean you've really done anything. And people don't realize that by limiting the oil or gas production in our own country, we still have to use those resources. So they're coming from overseas. And it's not just affecting, okay, well, I'll drive a bit less. It's you won't get food because what do the farmers use to do their crops? All their machinery, all their drying equipment. Like our whole economy is just basically hanging by a thread, I think, as it is. And people, like for myself and my husband, we're retired, we're comfortable. So it's not going to hurt us a great deal.
Well,
but my kids,
not even with gas
grandkids,
prices like this?
Well,
$1.49 a liter?
We don't have to, I mean, it hurts, but we don't have to commute anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But my kids, my grandkids, oh my God, my son is barely scraping by as it is. He cannot bus to work. And he can't afford $1.50 a liter, which is what it's almost up to. So they're bankrupting the country for no good reason other than ideology.
I guess I'm just worried, and I thank you for your call this morning, Sharon. And I'm kind of here to get people's blood boiling. You know, I'm trying to be neutral, but it's never been my strong point. I just wonder, as we reach this crossroads, how do we prosper? How do we maintain our standard of living, while at the same time doing our part to fight climate change, okay? By the government's own admission, the natural resources sector of our economy employs almost 2 million Canadians. Directly employs almost 2 million people. Okay, it's 1.8 million Canadians. That's right from Enercan, okay? Natural resources, it's their number. It's 17% of our GDP. It's $90 billion a year in capital investment, new investment, capital investment, buying new machinery. Invested every year, right? And $240 billion a year worth of exports. And direct revenues to the government, $22 billion a year. That's the government's number, $22 billion a year. Now look at the balance sheets of the federal government and all the provincial governments. Do you think any of them can afford to say goodbye to a single dollar of $22 billion and still offer people everything they want? Socialized medicine, free public education, public pensions, social safety net? This is what's at stake. This is what's at stake. The health of the economy. And if you work in natural resources, you know it. The money's very good. The money is very good. But we've declared a climate crisis. If you ask Canadians, do you want Canada to fight climate change? They would, for the most part, they would say yes. And the Prime Minister has made this big commitment on climate change targets. Do you want him to stick to that climate change target? Are you willing to pay more? Are you willing to suffer the pain in the natural resources side of the economy? Barry in Ottawa. Barry, you're on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, Barry.
Finally, back to my favorite topic.
Okay.
Trudeau bashing. I wonder if we could get someone to ask him, Rob, if he dyed his hair black. So
Yeah,
that
Barry, I don't have time for silly stuff, Barry. We're talking about serious stuff here. We're talking about the unity of the country. We're talking about the economy. We're not talking about Justin Trudeau's hair this morning, Barry. No. More serious stuff than that, Barry, going on this morning. Sorry. Osgood, Douglas. Good morning, Douglas, here on City News.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
So
Douglas.
in terms of our topic today,
Douglas, are you on a speakerphone or something, or you got your window open or something?
No, I just had cancer surgery, so I sound like Darth Vader.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry about that. It's very hard to hear you, sir. Just very hard to hear.
I apologize.
Okay.
So we have a CPI that's at 4.5%, highest in 18 years.
Yeah.
Our economy's already on years. So debilitating a major sector like that would be catastrophic, I would think.
Okay, so you think the government's going in the wrong direction here, policy-wise, though, right? Yeah.
Perspective, if they want to impose these limits, China has already said no. India has already said no.
That's right, yeah.
Russia is not going to support it.
No.
So why would we cripple ourselves with all the major polluters continuing to go full bore?
Yeah, that's a great point, taking that global view, Douglas. I'm just going to let you go. Very difficult to hear you, and your phone is checking in and out there. Very difficult to hear you, though. Good luck. Roger Drummond. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning,
Yeah.
Rob. Yeah, he was a little bit hard to hear.
A little bit hard to
he
hear.
had some good things to say.
Yes, yes.
You know, Rob, these people that are making these decisions, whether it's Trudeau and then that new minister there.
Yep, Guilbeault, Guilbeault, yeah.
People, number one, they'll never suffer, okay? You know, it's one thing to tell people what to do and then not do it yourself, because they don't know what it's like to, like that one of the ladies that called up, they're retired now. Like my wife and I are retired. We don't have a lot of money, and we saved all our life to try to have a bit of comfort in our retirement.
Yeah.
So right now we're into the process of selling some of our land that we bought decades ago because we have to, in order to stay here. But you know, Rob, if you look at the food banks across Canada and how the use has gone up tremendously, especially in the last few years.
Yeah. I spoke to the CEO of the food bank just yesterday. So.
Yeah, I know, and I heard you talking to him. Now, I'd like to see a statistic to say how many of these people in the oil and gas industry that are going to the food bank now that were making like 120,000, 150,000, like my niece's husband, you know, and some of the other people in my family that work out in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Like, what about those people? I mean, did they have to go cap in hand to the food bank? And meanwhile, you know, they were used to making a decent living and putting a lot of money into our economy besides their high tax rate. This idea of Canada giving up everything and then, like, you know, Russia, China, India, I think they'd like to do better if we ever got natural gas to them. And maybe this minister that Trudeau appointed, maybe he should give him a post as a diplomat. Let him go to Saudi Arabia, or let him go and preach to China about the environment and see how far he goes. I mean, it's getting to be a bit out of hand, Rob, and we see it every single day. The energy costs at the grocery store I was at the other day, it just never stops. And everything that we buy is affected by fossil fuels.
Of course, sir.
And how many more people, like even with us, you know, we can still carry on for a while and still help some people out. But what's the point of, you know, turning around and saying, okay, let's get all this out of here, and everybody's going to freeze, nobody can eat, and these people that have the money and the means, you know what's going to happen, Rob? People are going to be so angry. Like, you know, one of the strongest instincts in humanity is reproduction and survival. Now, if they have to go around and some of these people that are wealthy making the decisions and then find out who they are, where they are, maybe start taking something from them if that's what it takes to keep their.
Well, I would hate to think that it would come to that.
But I think the country will break up before that.
Well, you know, as I said, Roger, I thank you for your phone call this morning. I'm worried on two fronts. I'm worried about the economy, and I'm worried about the unity of the country with appointments like this. But Roger makes such a good point. Just what people are bringing home, you know, on paychecks every week or every 2 weeks. You know, here I go down this StatScan rabbit hole again this morning. I was looking this up this morning. StatScan releases a report called Average Weekly Earnings. Okay? Average weekly earnings. I know I've mentioned this in the past. if you have a government that is basically through its policies planning to end employment for people in the natural resources, in effect, what that government is doing in this country is killing some of the best paying jobs for the middle class in this country. Full stop, end of story. If you look at all the industries that are tracked by StatsCan in the report for the average weekly earnings, you would learn that as of the end of 2020, the average Canadian earns about $1,100 a week before tax. $1,100 a week. Okay? $57,000 a year. If you're making $57,000 a year, congratulations, you're average. Okay? Some jobs pay more, some professions pay more. If you're in the sciences, you're making $1,500 a week on average, or 78 grand a year. If you're in public administration, i.e. if you work for the government, it's about $1,400 a week, or $73,000 a year. Average. These are averages. Of course, some people are making more. Finance, like banking and insurance, same, about 73 grand a year, $1,400 a week. If you are in the arts, you're an artist, not anywhere close to that. You are a starving artist, $700 a week, 36 grand a year. Fast food, $440 a week, or 22 grand a year. Okay, you get the idea? But the average, you average it all out. Who's making big money, who's not? It's $1,100 a week. Gross. Before tax. The highest paying jobs of all in all the industries measured by Statistics Canada, guess what industry that is? Mining and oil and gas. Where the average weekly earnings are $2,100 a week, or $109,000 a year. So do you understand why people leave the poorer parts of Canada, like where I'm from, Atlantic Canada, or why they leave Northern Canada, or why they leave rural Ontario, or small town BC, to flock to places like Northern Alberta, Northern Saskatchewan, the interior of British Columbia, to do the hard work, where the men and women get dirt under their fingernails, calluses on the hands? It's for a chance to make that kind of money, so they can have a decent quality of life, so they can buy a decent home, provide a future for their family. And they earn every penny. It's a tough way to make a living. Very good money. Someone working in the natural resources sector in this country is basically making double what the typical Canadian worker makes. And we have people like Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Guilbeault, Mr. Wilkinson. What do they talk about? The just transition. We need a just transition. We need to transition people out of those dirty jobs and into cleaner, greener, more virtuous jobs. Jobs we approve of. Jobs Greta would approve of. Right? What they are saying, in effect, is hundreds of thousands of Canadians, you need to take a pay cut because we frown upon the kind of work that you do. We are going to transition you into a job that we approve of. And if you're lucky, you might make half as much money as you're making right now. If you're lucky. You may end up working at a call center for minimum wage. Because we have a climate crisis. And the climate crisis is more important than you and your family and your bank account. Isn't that what they're really saying? That is what is on the altar right now to be sacrificed because of the climate crisis. Because those jobs are dirty jobs. We have a government that is sending a serious message. Those are not the kind of jobs we have in mind for Canadians anymore. You think Mr. Guilbeault cares about what a heavy machine operator in Fort McMurray is bringing home for his family every 2 weeks? You think he gives, you know what? Careful, careful, careful. He doesn't think that person should be employed in that industry in the first place. Very odd view of the world, that fellow. He's opposed to oil. Fair enough. Okay, he's hardly alone. Same for coal. Doesn't like natural gas. Opposed to nuclear power. Against any more hydroelectric power. And opposed to the forestry. So just how are people supposed to keep the lights on and stay warm in Mr. Guilbeault's world? Rob Snow Show. I'll be right back.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa, and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit. But people, I think, know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well, too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
All right, I get so worked up sometimes. David, just turn me off when I start going off like that. Joanne, Orleans. Good morning. Joanne, you're on City News. Joanne.
I think you have good reason to be worked up. I think most of us are. We were appalled when we heard the news of the appointments this week, really appalled. And I had to ask myself many questions, like, how does the Prime Minister abdicate his primary responsibility? How has that become socially acceptable to throw away the security and prosperity of a country? That's his number one job. To represent us on the world stage, yes, but mostly to see to the country's well-being. And all I can think of is that you have to go back to the ideas. Ideas matter. John Robson used to say that all the time. We've been hearing about catastrophic disasters going to happen for the last 30 years that have not happened. And we've taken away all platforms for dissenting opinions. Even if we had followed through on every promise ever made on climate change, someone maybe explained to me how that volcano in Spain and the one a few years ago in the Netherlands, how they would not have affected climate change if CO2 affects climate change. When we talk about ideas matter, I was struck by the news this morning when you were saying how there were councillors who, or the mayor said, councillors actually voting against parking in the new library. Thinking, how stupid is that? That big, beautiful building, which is going to have plenty of meeting spaces, not just books, and you're going to say no parking. But it's true of locally of garbage incineration or bikes, all of that. Ideas matter. And that's where we have to tackle them. The radical environmentalists, they, in my opinion, they're anti-person. They're anti-person. They believe the moral high ground is to care about what's going to happen 100 years from now instead of the well-being of people today. Today, people are worried about the price of goods, availability of goods, heating, cooling, all our transportation needs. These are our clear and present concerns. But that's not what radical environmentalists care about. They have this agenda. But I think we need to go back to the ball of ideas. I think we need more platforms for abundant dissent on climate change with views that are supported by the data and the money trails. Because how a prime minister can throw an entire, multiple industries under the bus and seemingly hand over economic prosperity to countries like China, India, and Russia, you really have to wonder how that has become socially acceptable.
All right, Joanne, got to go. Lots of calls here to get to here because I've held off here. Glenn, good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you. Yeah, kind of worked up today.
Yeah, I know. I'm enjoying it, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
You and I have chatted after each election. We chatted shortly after the election in 15, again in 19,
okay.
And then here we are after this last one again. And I remember mentioning to you that it'd be the worst government in the history of Canada.
Right.
I think he hit it. I think it definitely is.
Okay.
But I'm not a.
I mean, I just feel that we're at a crossroads here. We're at a crossroads here. You know, we have what should be an economy that should be on fire, just given the demand for everything that we have. But we have a government that seems intent on taking us in a totally different direction. I'm just kind of worried about it. I'm worried about the unity of the country as a consequence. So.
Well, you may as well put a close sign on Alberta after what just happened in the
I mean, it's not just Alberta. I mean, it's everywhere. It's Saskatchewan. It's LNG in British Columbia. It's natural resources in Newfoundland.
And the sad part of it is, and I'm not a climate denier by any means.
No, but yeah.
You could shut down the whole country. And what's it going to affect the world's situation as far as...
Well, sir, I have a commentary that's coming up tomorrow morning, both here on City News and Shea 106. Bloomberg News has a story this morning. There's one company in China, the state-owned oil company of China, Glenn, produces more greenhouse gas emissions every year than all of Canada. That's a Bloomberg News story. Not a Rebel News story, like Bloomberg News. One company. Okay. Chris in Almont. Chris.
You're being on, Rob. I actually think he's just getting ready for the next election. He really doesn't care about any of the stuff that we're facing right now. He doesn't even care about how we're going to pay for any of the stuff that they want to pay for. He's just getting ready for the next election. He said it during the last election, And this is really a look at the squirrel cabinet, okay?
Okay.
All the people are in there, and they simply unite the rage amongst the rest of us, okay? Because they're people that really don't care about energy resources or anything else, and that's important to Canadians.
Oh, it would seem they frown upon it, sir.
They not only frown upon it, I mean, they don't care. They live in cities. They're not going to freeze to death.
Right.
Everybody else will. Everybody else won't be able to get to work. Wait till you're in minus 20 trying to run an electric car. Out of a 120-volt receptacle.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Chris, thank you. I just want to sneak in one more call here just before the news. We'll have to be very quick, like a minute or less. Carol in Orleans. Carol?
I want to clarify something. I've got a quote here from Trudeau, and it's very interesting. He said, the very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me.
Yeah. Okay. You're way off the topic. Go away. We'll be right back after the news on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 28th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 6 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Allegations of sex abuse being levied at a city-run long-term care home. The city says an incident happened on Tuesday this week at the Gary J. Armstrong home involving a staff member and a resident. They add that as soon as they were notified, the staff was removed from the home, family and police notified. Staff at the home and family are providing additional support to the resident, and a full investigation is underway. Ontario is moving capacity limits or removing them at outdoor organized public events like Remembrance Day ceremony coming up and Santa Claus parades. Some cities, though, have already opted not to do the traditional Santa Claus parade with crowds this year. A spokesperson for the Health Minister, Christine Elliott, says outdoor capacity limits are also being lifted in most other sectors. That includes ski hills, fairs, and festivals. Outdoor social gatherings, though, still limited to 100 people. Outdoor capacity limits at nightclubs also remain in effect. The daily COVID case count in Ontario is 409 today, along with 3 additional deaths. 1.3% of the almost 32,400 tests that were done came back positive. 28 new cases in Ottawa, 2 in Eastern Ontario, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases today in Renfrew. City News time 11:02. An Ottawa paramedic has been charged with using a fraudulent COVID-19 vaccine certificate in order to keep his job. Police say the man obtained the certificate submitting forged documents and attesting he had received 2 vaccine doses. The City of Ottawa informed police about the man's fraudulent certificate last Thursday. Now 30-year-old Ali Abdelghani was arrested on Wednesday, charged with uttering a forged document and obtaining by false pretense and forgery. City News time 11:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Not as warm for us as yesterday, but a beautiful fall day overall. Plenty of sunshine, the high 11 degrees. There will be a brisk wind, though, out of the east-northeast. Tonight, mainly clear, down to just 2 degrees. And then tomorrow, sun and cloud, showers late in the evening, mainly overnight, though. Friday's high 13 degrees. For today, the high 11.
And right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 6 degrees. The mayor of Ottawa firing back at Bob Chiarelli, the former mayor, strongly considering a run for the top job in the next election, told City News earlier this week Jim Watson had done a disappearing act when it comes to light rail. Watson disagrees.
I'm not some wilting flower that disappears, but, I also don't go out and hold an hourly press conference on updates on every single issue. I think, you pace yourself. And I do a lot of work that, Bob would know about behind the scenes, because the mayor is not just responsible for holding press conferences.
He says 90% of his current workload is spent dealing with LRT and COVID. 10 Gatineau residents arrested yesterday after a series of coordinated raids by police targeting 6 homes and 4 vehicles. Apartments all in Gatineau and Hull. Searches turned up a bounty of items like guns, drugs, cash, and edibles. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Bank of Canada did the expected, kept the overnight interest rate on hold yesterday, 0.25%. But it changed its tune on inflation. It says inflation now appears stronger and more persistent than expected. So what does all of this mean? Benjamin Tal is Deputy Chief Economist, CIBC Capital Markets. He's back with me on the Rob Snow Show this morning on City News. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Well, it's kind of playing out, Benny, pretty much as you predicted, but I would like to ask you, first of all, about the bond buying program, the quantitative easing program. What is your reaction to the fact that has ended? It's over. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no big surprise. The market has been anticipating that. The Bank of Canada was telling us that will be the case. Still buying $1 billion a week, but this is basically just being neutral. So basically, quantitative easing is over, which means that the next layer of defense when it comes to the Bank of Canada is basically higher interest rates, and that's exactly what the market is starting to speculate about.
Okay. The comments from the governor, Tiff Macklem, about inflation, what do you make of them?
In our last conversation, I told you that nobody knows where inflation will be 6, 8, 12 months from now.
Okay.
And when I say nobody, I included the Bank of Canada in that nobody. And now the Bank of Canada is telling us, you know what, we really don't know. This narrative regarding short-lived inflation, yes, but what is short-lived? What is temporary? We know that it's not a permanent story, but how long will it last? That's the big question. And we know that the supply chain issue is much more complicated. I talked to many CEOs of many companies, and they're telling me, you know what, that's going to be with us for at least another year. So that's something that clearly making the life of the Bank of Canada a bit more difficult. And now they're telling us, listen, maybe we will have to start raising interest rates earlier than anticipated, admitting that it's better to buy some insurance than running the risk of being behind the curve chasing inflation.
It seemed to me, though, we carried a little bit of the remarks live here during the program yesterday. Always so interesting to hear how central bankers speak. They have a language all their own, Benny, as you know, central bankers. You need subtitles.
No, but they will never. Also, they will never give you a straightforward answer.
No. But
they believe in what they call constructive ambiguity.
Constructive ambiguity, yes. Yeah. But it did seem, though, one of the things that came through to me just listening to Mr. Macklem yesterday is they understand the threat that inflation poses. They take it seriously. They're watching it closely, and they're ready to act. I got the sense that they will have no gumption at all, no hesitance at all to pull the trigger. I don't think. What do you think? What was your takeaway from it?
Yes, and the question is why? Because as we discussed in our previous conversation, inflation is a lagging indicator. So you have two options.
Yeah.
One is you wait and wait and wait and wait. We're basically waiting for inflation to go down. And if you wait for too long and inflation is getting too close and it's not going down, then what happens? You are basically starting to chase a lagging indicator. And what do? You start raising interest rates in a panic. And when you raise interest rates in a panic, you overshoot. And that's basically planting the seed for a recession. It happened many times in the past. In fact, almost every economic recession in the post-war era was triggered, if not caused, by a monetary policy error. So what the Bank of Canada is now telling us, we basically don't want to repeat past mistakes. I would like to get and start raising interest rates early. And if you start early and go baby steps, maybe the ultimate increase, what we call the terminal rate, will be lower than when you do it in a panic and overshoot. I think that's the current thinking. So when people are looking at interest rates and basically suggesting that they will start rising soon, and this soon can be April, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because then you start early, you go baby steps, and you basically eliminate the risk of overshooting.
Okay. So what is the time frame for your team there at CIBC Capital Markets on when tightening could begin?
At this point, our call is that the first move will be June, and then there will be another one, July, and then another one will be in October. So 2 moves in 2022, and about 3 moves in 2023, altogether about 5 hikes. However, there is a risk to this forecast, and if there is a risk, it's asymmetrical. The risk is that actually they will move a bit earlier than that, maybe in April. So between April and July, expect a move by the Bank of Canada. And that's something that I think that the bank is willing to admit that they are willing to do. Now, of course, everything depends on the virus. And if tomorrow we have a 5th wave, another variant, then all bets are off.
Okay, so a rate then that is an overnight rate here, that is 0.25% now, you would expect, say, by this time next year to be what, 0.75? Do you expect these to be 25 basis point moves?
I think that by this time it will be roughly 50 basis points higher.
50 basis points higher than it is now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right. But what is the likelihood? I've been watching a lot of, looking a lot at, and I don't want to bore the listeners by getting too technical, but it seems to me if you really want to see what market sentiment is about the real inflationary environment, you really have to watch what's going on with bond yields, and in particular 10-year bond yields. And in the United States, everybody's been watching this number 1.5% and how much it's going to overshoot 1.5%. Here in Canada, the same bond is yielding, a government of Canada bond, a little more than 1.6%. Could those 10-year yields become detached from whatever the overnight rate is from the Bank of Canada?
Yes, we have a situation in which the market is now starting to price in 3 moves by the Bank of Canada in 2020, another 3 to 4 moves in 2023. That's a very aggressive Bank of Canada. Mm-hmm. And the long end of the curve, namely the bond market, is starting to basically pricing it in. This is something that suggests that we are going to see short-term interest rates rising at one point, and the long end of the curve is basically trying to get the short end of the curve will do. That's more or less where we are.
Right. 10-year yield U.S. Treasury today, 1.55%. Okay. How resilient, that's a buzzword for the pandemic, Benny, resilient. How resilient will the Canadian consumer be in the face of higher interest rates?
That's a very good question. Now, let's go back to your previous question. And the question is, why the long end of the curve? Why you don't see the bond market rising even faster? And in terms of yields. And I think that's the realization that maybe to the extent that the Bank of Canada and the Fed will start move early, that will eliminate the risk of overshooting, and that's actually positive for the bond market. And I think that's what's starting to happen entering the cycle market. That's one thing. The other is the consumer. If you look at what's happening in Canada versus the US, even during the pandemic, we are seeing than the Americans, especially on the mortgage market. So that's something that we have to take into account. However, we have to remember that only about 20% of mortgage holders are renewing their mortgage.
Okay.
Sensitive. 20%, 1 out of 5.
Right.
Now, if you look at the 5-year mortgage 5 years ago, it was basically the same as it is now. So if you however, variable rate mortgage holders that are basically fixed for 5 years in terms of the term, but the rate is variable, the variable rate was about 100 basis points lower than it is now. So, sorry, now it is lower than it was a year ago, which means that people with variable rate mortgages will not feel the impact. Fixed term mortgages will feel the impact. Overall, you do the calculations, and we are talking about roughly $5 billion of increase in interest payment in terms of average increase in
drop in the bucket. That's a drop in the bucket.
That's like 0.5% of consumer spending. It's not a big deal.
All right. Benny, we'll let you go. Thank you.
A pleasure.
Yeah, bye-bye. Deputy Chief Economist at the Bank of Commerce, Benjamin Tal. Up next, Calgary-Nose Hill is the riding Conservative Member of Parliament, Michelle Rempel-Garner, on the Cabinet Shuffle. Next on City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Borrowed Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's been far too long since we've had Michelle Rempel-Garner on our show. Calgary area member of Parliament, Calgary-Nose Hill is the riding. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just looking here, it's in Calgary right now. 0 feels like -1 and 10 centimeters of snow in the forecast for Calgary tomorrow.
I'm actually sitting at my desk in Ottawa, and I always love to go home to Calgary because it's home.
Yes.
But the snow.
Yeah. So let's talk. We have to talk about this cabinet shuffle here. What is your reaction to, in particular, the two appointments at Environment and Climate Change and Natural Resources? We have the former Greenpeace activist, former Heritage Minister, Mr. Guilbeault, going to Environment and Climate Change, and at Natural Resources, it's the former Environment and Climate Change Minister, Mr. Wilkinson. What's your reaction to those appointments?
I think writ large on the cabinet, it's interesting to watch Trudeau shuffle out, what some people have considered could be notionally deep voices of reason, like, Marc Garneau being removed from Foreign Affairs, a few other people that, sort of, they have their own life and views outside of Trudeau. And I think this cabinet is a move for Trudeau to really circle the wagons after, a disappointing election result for him, with people who are activists and loyalists and yes people. And that's never good for public policy. I think, as an Alberta MP, where I would like to see the consensus on the environment and the economy go with our country is that we are in a transition period. Energy is very important to Canadians. We can produce energy cleanly as we look to, develop, clean energy technologies, like a pragmatic conversation on these issues, but also understand that, you can't just eliminate an entire sector of the economy and a source of energy without having massive implications on the lives of everyday Canadians. And Stephen Guilbeault's entire existence has been to turn a blind eye to that reality, and that's not compassionate. It's not like being an activist. Okay, it's easy to be inflammatory. It's much more difficult, and it takes much more skill and conviction to actually come up with results that help people. And I just, I watched him bungle the heritage file, the bill around free speech. He had all of these early significant mistakes around, wanting media to apply for licenses. He is not a competent parliamentarian, but he is a yes man to Justin Trudeau, and he is an activist, and he is an extremist on some of these things in the past. And at a time, such a critical time in Canada's, economic development and history post-pandemic, for Trudeau to be appointing activists and yes people, I really think that sends a message to many Canadians that, that stability that we need, that pragmatism, it might be lacking, putting it mildly. So it was a disappointing signal yesterday.
Disappointing. Okay. How about this? 39 members of the cabinet, okay? Greater Toronto area has 14 cabinet ministers. 14, okay? It's in the the heavily populated, very important economically, okay? If it was his own province, it'd have one of the largest provincial economies, the GTA. We all understand this. But 14 cabinet ministers. Quebec, 11 cabinet ministers, including some pretty high-profile positions. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba combined, 2 members of the cabinet and not the most prestigious positions. What is your reaction to that? Regional representation. What do you make of that, Michelle?
Well, I think you've outlined the reality pretty well, but a few observations. Even when Trudeau has had, so for example, I think of Kent Hare, several years ago, member of Parliament for Calgary Centre, he was in Trudeau's cabinet, and he was in an arguably more senior position, completely ineffectual for advocating for Alberta. And it's because I firmly believe that even if Trudeau had more
options or whatever,
they would not have import, because Trudeau doesn't care about Western Canada, and that is why Western Canada votes for Conservative MPs, because it's very clear that there's nothing on the table for Western Canada in a Justin Trudeau government. So in this situation, so first of all, you've outlined the reality, and to me, it just underscores that point. But if he actually wanted to show some care for national unity, which I think he doesn't, because he benefits from that politically, he would be reaching out to people like me. And you don't have to like someone to work with them. If he actually cared about the country, he would recognize that Western Canada does not support his government, right, the way other parts of the country do, and say, okay, leaders who have been elected in that, like me, like others, how do we fix this? How do we come up with solutions? Yes, we're going to fight with each other on certain things, but there's something bigger here that we have to achieve. And I've had that experience in Parliament before. I've worked, when I was in government under Stephen Harper, I had excellent working relationships with members of the NDP when they were in opposition. It's not always peaches and roses, I'm not trying to say that, but there was an attempt to work together. I just don't, he does not do that. He doesn't do it. And to me, it shows that he's more interested in power than he is in national unity or the success of our country. And that is why we are in the situation that we are right now, and that's why he has such a poor reputation as a prime minister.
Okay. Your previous critic's portfolio was health, right? You were the critic for health.
Yes.
So Minister Hadju is out as the health minister. I'd like your reaction to that. And what do you think of the new health minister, Mr. Duclos is his name? What do you think?
Well, I actually wish Mr. Duclos the best. We are, we're not through the pandemic yet, and there are many issues that the government needs to address in a smart way that Patty Hadju was just not able to do. She was not on top of her department. It's clear to me why she was shuffled out. But there are issues that are difficult that we need to address, like vaccine hesitancy, right? And that became this politicized narrative in the campaign, particularly by Trudeau.
Right.
And that issue is too important to get wrong.
But don't you think your party has also contributed to the politicization of that issue? Conservative
I would just
party.
say this, as a Canadian, so MP hat off, politician hat off, somebody who cares about public health and getting through this, I want people to get vaccinated. Okay. And I think everybody needs to take a sober look at this issue, all political stripes, and say, what can we do? What are the reasons for vaccine hesitancy? And rather than vilifying people and taking, political wins one way or the other on this, how do we overcome those? There's low-hanging fruit that we could be implementing right now. That's where I would like to be as a Canadian, and that's what I would like to see from leaders. But being a leader as a elected official, that's what I'm encouraging all sides to be focused on right now, because it's too important. But no, Patty, it is no surprise to me. That was a no-brainer. The gaffe after fumble. I think when history looks back on the pandemic and Canada's response, it's not going to treat her kindly, unfortunately. So I hope that Minister Duclos, for the sake of all of us, does a much better job and addresses some of these issues with grace and with dignity and with compassion for all Canadians.
I don't want you to, I know you can't spill the beans, but it's, less, 3 weeks to go or something, a little more than 3 weeks to go until the House is back. How would you describe the unity of the caucus right now?
We had a great meeting yesterday.
Okay.
I was sitting in our caucus meeting and just sort of watching, and one of the things that really struck me was how, like, our MPs that were elected in 2019, they really didn't get a chance to caucus, right? Because the pandemic, Parliament was shut down. Yep. And then we have a lot of new MPs from 2021, or this last election, great new crop. And it's like, there's that old adage, like, groups need to norm, storm, and form. Like, you need to get a group dynamic. And that actually, I think, happened yesterday. And it was very good to see, particularly given that as opposition, we have a very big role to play in holding the government to account, particularly at this time where we've got inflationary pressures, major challenges facing the country. And I was honestly very encouraged by how we left that caucus meeting yesterday.
Okay.
So it was good. I hope it stays that way.
Okay. Thank you for the...
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Focus better.
Heal better.
Sleep better.
Partner better.
Create better. Love better.
Breathe better.
Learn better.
Laugh better. Lead better.
Think better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Happy better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
I did it. I need it.
A hero gave it.
And I am alive.
As an organ donor, you can save up to 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 others. Please go to our website. Pledge a gift of life. You'll be glad you did.
Focus better.
Partner better.
Sleep better.
Breathe better.
Love better. Work better. Friend better. Unwind better.
Everything gets better when you get active.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
suivre la diffusion YouTube. Today we will be hearing remarks from notre porte-parole aujourd'hui est Dr. Brent Malachny, Deputy Medical Officer of Health with Ottawa Public Health, le Dr. Brent Malachny, médecin adjoint en santé publique avec Santé publique Ottawa. Following remarks, we will take questions from the media. A friendly reminder to please keep your microphone on mute until I invite you to ask your question. Suite à nos porte-paroles, nous allons prendre des questions des médias. Veuillez désactiver votre microphone jusqu'au moment de poser votre question. I will now hand it over to Dr. Malachny. Dr. Malachny, c'est à vous.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, bonjour, Kwe. While the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in Ottawa remains relatively steady, we continue to see COVID transmission in situations where people are starting to let their guard down by not wearing masks, not maintaining physical distancing, or not staying home while sick. We are seeing evidence of this particularly in workplaces, sports settings, and social gatherings. Yesterday, Ottawa Public Health released the latest example of a cluster that occurred as a result of an individual who participated in an outdoor sports game without masking or distancing, and along with another individual, attended an indoor social gathering after they had developed symptoms. One also attended school after developing symptoms. Both later tested positive for COVID-19. This led to at least 26 people testing positive for COVID-19 and over 200 high-risk contacts. In this case, all individuals confirmed that COVID-19 had not been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, though all met age-based eligibility criteria for vaccination. The drivers of this cluster of transmission are not unique and result in significant disruption to schools, businesses, and families, and can be avoided by adhering to public health measures such as masking when in close contact with others, staying home and seeking testing when you have symptoms, and of course, getting your COVID-19 vaccine once you are eligible. As more restrictions are gradually lifted, it will be and may be tempting to let our guards down. Let me be clear, the pandemic is not over. In fact, many European countries who have lifted almost all their restrictions are currently experiencing a resurgence. Alors que les restrictions deviennent de plus en plus légères, il peut sembler tentant d'alléger nos propres précautions. Je vais être clair, la pandémie n'est pas terminée. En fait, plusieurs pays européens qui ont élevé presque toutes les mesures sanitaires font présentement face à une résurgence. COVID-19 is still present in our community and many cannot yet be immunized. It is important to continue to be cautious in our everyday activities to help reduce transmission of COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses. This means continuing to follow public health guidelines currently in place, including wearing a mask and maintaining a distance around others, especially indoors. It means limiting our close contacts and keeping gatherings small. It means continued daily screening for COVID-19 symptoms and staying home when sick and getting tested right away. And it means getting fully vaccinated as soon as you're eligible. Every person fully vaccinated reduces the risk of impact on our hospitals and our ICUs and keeps levels of COVID-19 in the community and in our schools low. Chaque personne qui est complètement vaccinée réduit le risque d'impact sur nos hôpitaux et nos unités de soins intensifs et maintient un bas taux de la COVID-19 dans nos communautés et nos écoles. We are awaiting approval of the COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 5 to 11. And once Health Canada completes the review of the effectiveness and safety of the vaccine, OPH is ready to implement its plan to vaccinate this age group once the vaccine is approved and the supply is received. Nous attendons l'approbation des vaccins contre la COVID-19 pour les enfants de 5 à 11 ans de Santé Canada, pendant qu'ils complètent leur revue de l'efficacité et la sécurité du vaccin. SPO est prêt à mettre en œuvre son plan de vaccination pour ce groupe d'âge dès que le vaccin est approuvé et approvisionné. We've been planning for the rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations for this age group in consultation with various stakeholders. OPH has explored different scenarios to facilitate effective and expedient vaccination for this age group. These scenarios include options to increase staffing, increasing community and neighborhood clinics, and communicating with children and families about their options to get vaccinated. We are also exploring ways to ensure our clinic operations are as welcoming as possible for families and expanding clinic hours to the weekend and after school. Ottawa Public Health is here to support parents and caregivers in making informed decisions about vaccination for their children. More information on our plan for this age group will be provided in the coming days. In the meantime, please visit our website for more information. A third dose of the COVID-19 vaccine is now available to certain populations most at risk of serious illness. Information on current eligibility, recommended intervals, and requirements for a third dose are available on our website. Drop-in vaccinations are available for third doses at any community clinic, pop-up clinic, or clinic in Ottawa. Please check our website for a list of clinic locations and hours of operation. Residents of long-term care homes, retirement homes, elder care lodges, and elderly living in other congregate settings are also being offered a third dose of vaccination. Earlier this week, appointment bookings at Ottawa Public Health community vaccine clinics for parents with children ages 6 months to 2 years old and their immediate families, as well as for people experiencing barriers to getting the flu vaccine. These barriers include being a newcomer to Canada, having no Ontario Health Insurance Plan or OHIP card, having no primary care provider, such as a doctor or nurse, and those who have had difficulty accessing the vaccine at a pharmacy. Starting in November, all Ottawa residents can receive their flu vaccine through their local participating pharmacy or family doctor, and we strongly encourage them to do so. Débutant en novembre, tous les résidents d'Ottawa pourront recevoir le vaccin contre la grippe auprès des pharmacies locales participantes ou le médecin de famille, et nous les encourageons d'aller le prendre. For more information on where to receive your flu vaccine this year, visit ottawapublichealth.ca/flu. And lastly, some final advice for those planning to participate in Halloween festivities this weekend. If you plan to host or attend a social gathering, please keep it small. Keep windows open and have plenty of hand sanitizer available. Do not share food or drinks, and consider the vaccination status of those in attendance. If you are not yet fully vaccinated, maintain distance from others and wear a mask, especially when indoors. Si vous planifiez, organiser ou participer à un rassemblement social, essayez de la garder petit. Gardez les fenêtres ouvertes, ayez beaucoup de désinfectants disponibles, ne partagez pas votre nourriture ou vos boissons, et considérez le statut vaccinal de ceux qui participent. Si vous n'êtes pas encore vacciné, gardez une distance des autres et portez un masque, surtout à l'intérieur. Now, if you're choosing to give out treats, keep interactions with trick-or-treaters brief. Wear a face covering when physical distancing cannot be maintained. Don't set out a communal bowl for children to reach into, and consider contactless candy distribution by using tongs. And clean your hands often throughout the evening using soap and water or hand sanitizer, and particularly before you touch your face. For the trick-or-treaters, be creative. Build the face covering into your costume, but remember, a costume mask is not a substitute for a face covering. Do not crowd the doorway, and use hand sanitizer often, especially before touching your face. And for everyone, continue daily screening before and after your event. Stay home if you're sick, even if symptoms are mild. And assess your risk before engaging in day-to-day activities for Halloween and beyond. Visit ottawapublichealth.ca/socialwise for more information. I want to wish everyone a safe and happy Halloween weekend. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you so much for that thorough update, Dr. Malachny. We also have today with us 4 questions. Marie-Claude Turcotte, Program Manager with Immunization, on the line for questions specifically about this year's flu immunization program. Nous avons aussi avec nous aujourd'hui Marie-Claude Turcotte, la gestionnaire du programme d'immunisation sur la ligne, pour vos questions au sujet de la campagne de vaccination contre la grippe cette année. I will now invite each media agency in alphabetical order to ask their questions. Please remember you have 1 question and 1 follow-up. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions des médias en ordre alphabétique. Chacun pourra poser une question ainsi qu'une question de suivi. We will start with CBC Ottawa, Joanne Chianello. Joanne, over to you.
Thanks very much. I guess this is for Dr. Brent Malachny. You know, it's interesting you said the pandemic's not over, and I was feeling guilty because sometimes I feel like it's over. We have 90% vaccination rate in Ottawa. The numbers are low. What kind of danger are you seeing now as more, as it gets colder and more people maybe come inside to do things?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Joanne. I mean, in some ways, I mean, we've been stable for a number of weeks when you look at our case counts, the number of hospitalizations, our positivity rate, the wastewater. So when you look at all of those things, we're stable. But that's due to a combination of things. That's the warmer weather, the extent of vaccinations, which have been continuing to grow in those who are eligible, and the variety of public health measures. So the chance here, or the worry, is things going out of balance again as things change. And you're quite right. I mean, one concern is, with the cooler, wetter weather, it's more difficult to do things outdoors. And that tends to push us indoors. And that's a higher risk setting. And so therefore we have to compensate for that, saying, well, who are we socializing with? And can we keep the numbers down? Can we ensure that people in the group are vaccinated? And if not, do we have masking and distancing in place? And I think that over time, as some of the public health measures are reduced, we're going to have to watch, and certainly we'll be monitoring to see if there's been any change in the case counts. We have 90%, which is great, first dose in those who are eligible, but we still have a lot of younger children who are not yet eligible, and so I think we need to do all we can to reduce the risk of them being exposed, and with the sort of impacts that can have on their ability to participate in school.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. I asked this, I have a friend who got COVID-19, even though he was fully vaccinated. He'd gone to a couple of sporting events, but wore a mask both times. Are you folks seeing the new cases? Are there people who've been fully vaccinated in those numbers?
The vaccine is highly effective, but it's not 100%. It's most effective, in the 90-95% range to prevent serious illness, hospitalizations and death, and that's really, really important. For preventing an infection, where you would get some symptoms, we're probably in the 80% range, or that ballpark. And so it is possible that if you have been vaccinated, that you can become infected. It's much more likely that it's going to be milder compared to what it would have been otherwise. And the available evidence is that you will be less infectious and for a shorter period of time compared to someone who's been unvaccinated. But it is possible. And so the takeaway message is twofold. First off, that even if you're fully vaccinated, if you develop symptoms, you should still think COVID and still behave accordingly, in that you don't go to work, don't go to social gatherings, stay home and get tested to rule out COVID. The other piece here is that if you're older, if you have serious comorbidities, even though you're fully vaccinated, you still want to have some caution about being exposed to COVID, because the vaccine may not be quite as effective for you as compared to a younger person. So caution's still important.
And has OPH had cases of people who are vaccinated who've tested positive? Do you know that?
Yeah, oh, yes. Yes. And I think what we're going to see as, we have 90% of those 12 and over have had at least one dose, 85 or so percent with two. Because the size of the population who's vaccinated is so much bigger than those who are unvaccinated, we will actually start to see more cases, breakthrough infections, so-called, in people who are vaccinated, just because there's so many more of them. But on average, they should be a lot milder and at a lower rate than we're seeing in unvaccinated. At this point, our latest data in Ottawa is that people who are unvaccinated are about 10 times higher risk of developing COVID compared to someone who's vaccinated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. We will now move over.
I think she snuck in a third question, by the way.
Well, that was just a clarification. That was
okay.
We'll count it as a clarification. We'll now move over to City News with Alex Gouge. Alex, over to you.
Thank you. So my first question is kind of going off what Joanne said. With as more people are heading inside again, do you feel like that we could potentially face further restrictions if people do continue to have their guard down?
I mean, I don't think it's so much around further restrictions. I think it's more for people's awareness. I think, we've been going through this almost for 2 years. We've been fortunate in having lower numbers, but there's still, people getting infected every day. That it's easy and I think psychologically desirable for people to want to push it all aside. And so I think it's important to remind people. So it's not over. We can do more things, but it's not. It's over and do anything and everything. So I think it's that reminder, and we'll continue to look at the numbers. And certainly what the government has announced is the timelines they've laid out are sort of contingent on there not being a resurgence. So I think it's all in our interest to have that sort of level of caution in terms of what we do, to be vaccinated, to not be going out if we're feeling ill, all those things that we have said, and to keep an eye on things. I would say the positive, if I sort of frame things positively, I say with respect to the Thanksgiving period, we didn't see a huge bump like we had for previous long weekends or major sort of times of get-togethers. On the other side, I would say, but we did see a bit of a blip. We did see an increase in cases, and we're seeing a little bit of a flattening of our trend line for the positivity rate, which had been going downward. So I think it's just a little gentle reminder that it is not over. We still have to have a little bit of caution there, particularly since our kids haven't had a chance to be vaccinated yet, and knowing that we're going indoors where there's more opportunity for transmission.
And then on kind of a different note, what are your thoughts on the Ottawa paramedic charged today for providing false proof of vaccination?
I think it's disappointing that anyone out there would be having fraudulent vaccine certificates. This is a way that we can collectively protect each other through vaccination. And it's allowing our businesses to be open, to catch up for the tough economic times that they've had throughout this. And there's a fairness piece here as well. I mean, the vast majority of people are doing the right thing, getting vaccinated, downloading the material, taking advantage of being able to go to a movie, go to a restaurant, go to an event, and I think this creates unfairness and an unlevel playing field if people are going to do that. And so I'm pleased that our enforcement colleagues and bylaw and police are out there and taking action if there is anyone who is having fraudulent certificates.
Thank you so much. We'll now move over to CTV Ottawa with Michael Woods. Michael, over to you, please.
Hi, Dr. Malachny. Thank you so much for taking our questions today. My first question is about parades. So we know that the city has not been issuing permits for, and I'm thinking specifically of Santa Claus parades because of the Ontario government regulations. But we learned today that the rules have been changed. The province is now lifting the capacity limits for organized public events held outdoors, as long as people wear masks if they can't be 2 meters apart. So I'm wondering if this change and also just the general situation with the numbers being fairly steady will change the OPH advice to the city at all about whether permits should be issued for these parades to be happening.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think that with the change in the provincial regulations that we need to review what's in the regulations and do it in the context of what our current COVID situation is in Ottawa, and use that to revisit the previous recommendations regarding parades. So these are just hot off the press, as you said this morning. So we need an opportunity to look at these and discuss also with our enforcement colleagues in bylaw around parades and other sort of events. So I would say stay tuned, give us a chance to take a look at it, and we will be getting back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. And just to follow up on a different matter, I know that Ottawa Public Health does not, and this is about the police vaccination policy, Ottawa Public Health does not provide specific recommendations to employers about their vaccine policies. And I know in this case that OPH provided the rationale to the police about the city's policy and OPH's policy about mandatory vaccinations. But given that the Ottawa Police are such a front-facing organization with members that are out in the community interacting with folks, are you at all concerned about the public health message that it might be sending that the police service is not requiring vaccination for its members, given that so many people in so many other lines of work, it's required for them? Are you concerned at all about that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I mean, overall, we want all people in Ottawa who are eligible to be vaccinated. I mean, that's the goal, to have as many people as possible. Workplaces play an important role in that. As employers, they need to have a vaccine policy. We've been recommending that for some time now. And in doing so, take a look at the risks of transmission for their workers to protect them, as well as to look at the risks for transmission to whomever they serve. So I can say here at Ottawa Public Health, when we looked at that and we looked at wanting to protect our workers, as well as thinking of the vulnerable clients and settings that we work in, the conclusion we came to was that it would be a stronger policy and provide greater protection if we had a mandatory vaccine policy, and others have similarly, employers have similarly landed on wanting to have a stronger policy. I think it's ultimately, it is up to each employer to think this through. We didn't provide any or ask for any specific input on the Ottawa Police Service policy. But as I said, I think a mandatory policy is a stronger way to go from the perspective of protecting one's workers and protecting the clients that one, or the public that one serves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will move over to Global News with Craig Lord. Craig, over to you, please.
Thanks very much. I think I'll ask some questions about flu shots. If Mary Claude maybe wants to weigh in on this. I'm noticing a bit of a difference, I think, between last year's flu season and this year's flu season. Not as many OPH specific, those mass vaccination clinics for adults, regardless of if they're parents or that kind of thing. So, and more of a focus on adults, the general population, getting them through pharmacies, family physicians. So, could you maybe talk about why is there that difference this year in OPH's clinics and how you're approaching the general population?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Claude. Perhaps I'll start and then just turn it over. Just a couple of contextual pieces around flu that I just want to say. I think the flu situation in Ottawa with respect to the virus could be a little bit different this year. Essentially, we didn't have any influenza last year, and really reflecting all of the sort of public health measures and